I don't understand as well why women get so offended, because I actually think that like your content and a lot of the red pill content is good for women. Like I think it's amazing for women. I think that millennial women got the worst of feminism.
Yes.
The women now in like their late teens with your kind of content, even though they might be offended by it, will just have it at the back of their minds playing as the years go by, you know?
You know, the biggest irony of this whole situation is that for all of these people in healthcare and in these hospitals who have literally just spent the past 3 years stalking me online, you know, those people have literally not learned anything. I can almost guarantee you, and a lot of you listening to this, if you are one of the people who has been stalking me here this whole time, you know that this is the reality. You know that if other people ask you direct questions about a lot of the topics I talk about, you cannot intelligently answer those questions. You know that a lot of what I talk about is literally, it might as well be a foreign language to you. And the reason for that is because a lot of you have already been placed in this honestly self-induced state of ignorance. So the greatest irony of this whole situation is that, this whole time, all these people that were stalking me online, it's clear that their motives were to get me removed from healthcare because for whatever reasons, due to their own biases and their own worldviews, they never liked me and they were never going to support me. And I understand that. But what I would like them to reflect on is that if they continue to live their lives this way, I don't really know what they think they're going to achieve. I really look at this situation as, at this point, like it's totally meaningless. If we want to talk about the definitions of words, meaninglessness to me is, you know, doing something over and over and over again with no purpose. It's making certain choices over and over again, yet never changing anything about yourself, never learning anything new, never doing anything for the better. So, you know, I don't know what a lot of these people thought that they were trying to achieve the whole time, but their meaningless behavior, you know, listening to me on these podcasts or stalking me on Facebook back when I had my Facebook, just think about how meaningless all of that was. In my estimation of things, it's basically as meaningless as the past 3 years that I just spent in college for a degree that I'm not going to get now because certain people took it upon themselves to sabotage me. So I just bring this up to explain to you guys, these are the consequences of ignorance. These are the long-term consequences of the kinds of people who they have become so disconnected from humanity that rather than just speaking to me directly, to ask me questions about what I believe in, or just to have a basic human interaction and conversation, they're so cowardly now that they can't do that. They need to stalk me or other people on social media. That's how disconnected they are from reality. They're so disconnected from humanity that they don't understand that when they are engaging in this behavior and really starting to cross very serious lines to interfere in my personal life or in the personal life of other people, simply on the basis of the fact that I have certain worldviews that they can't understand, and on some level they feel so threatened by that they think they have the right to go behind my back and gossip about me or try to sabotage me from a workplace or whatever the case may be. They don't realize the long-term consequences of that behavior. So honestly, it's just gotten to the point where this is why, I'm not uploading content to this channel anymore. And more likely than not in the future, I will not be on other channels or other social media platforms because, like I had explained to a lot of you before, unfortunately, you know, being in the area that I am in, and also given the fact that, unfortunately, I have attracted a lot of the wrong people to my social media platforms that honestly they are far too ignorant to comprehend what I talk about, and they will literally never understand a lot of the topics I discuss, and it's literally gotten to the point where the only purpose that any of my social media accounts really seem to accomplish is giving people, very petty, vindictive people, reasons to hold grudges against me, and then they want to go and try to interfere in my personal life. These are not people that I want to deal with or affiliate with or speak to. And as much as it offends them, you know, part of the whole problem with this is that a lot of these people who want to criticize me or act like, as much as they've honestly discriminated against me, uh, these people who have 2-year rad tech degrees, what they need to realize is that they are not as intelligent as they think they are. And I know that really rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but I would have a lot of them consider the fact that, a lot of the reasons that they have no idea, how philosophy works, for instance, and they also really don't know how to explain any ideas. And if you need proof of that, ask them direct questions about a lot of the things that I have talked about in the past. Ask them questions about feminism. Ask them questions about family law. Ask them questions about Christianity. And I understand a lot of these topics are taboo today, and you might potentially get in your own little, shitstorm of trouble if you bring these things up, which once again just proves where we are right now with free speech in America. But if you really, really want proof of how ignorant these people are, all you need to do is just ask them questions. And when you hear them say things like, oh, I don't know, or oh, gee, I guess I never really thought about that, or they can't even speak to you for 1 minute straight and intelligently explain their ideas anymore, then that will prove just how ignorant they are. And part of the whole problem with this is that this entire public educational system, the way it operates right now, it has really failed a lot of people. And this is why, they don't teach philosophy anymore in the public school systems, because philosophy teaches people how to think, and ideologies teach people what to think. And unfortunately, a lot of what is being promoted today in the public educational system and in the colleges, all they are ideologies. They are telling people what to think, but they are not giving them the tools to know how to think. So this is why you're hard pressed to find any philosophy courses on these college campuses. This is why you are hard pressed to have any intelligent conversations with most people at all at this point, because people are not being trained how to think. There are certain people, whether they were my classmates the first time, when I was in college, or they might even be some loose affiliations that I have now, or other people from over the years that honestly, they're not welcome here. I don't want them here, but unfortunately, YouTube is not like Facebook where I have any control over who logs on to this channel, finds it, whatever the case may be, even though I have not disclosed my legal name on this podcast, or the channel name is obviously not my legal name. But YouTube, as of right now, does not have any restrictions in place to be able to block users from gaining access to the channel. So the whole problem with this now has become there are very controversial political and social issues that are going on in our daily lives. Everybody knows this because a lot of the people that I have been able to build rapport with over the years, they see eye to eye with me on a lot of political topics and a lot of social issues. So this is not like this is only me who has these beliefs. It's just the fact that we live in a culture now where, first of all, a lot of people are afraid of speaking the truth or just having open, honest conversations because we live in a society of cowards. We live in a society of people where even if they work with you, they will stalk you on social media and then pretend not to do it. You can think of the situation of that rad tech that I just described to you guys recently. I'm sure she is probably still subscribed here and she's probably going to listen to this. I don't really care at this point because I'm never going to have anything to do with her ever again, so it's irrelevant to me at this point. But you can think of a situation like that. You know, this woman subscribes to my channel and then just wants to not say anything to me about that when she sees me in person, as if I don't know who's subscribed to my channel, especially when she was a public subscriber. There were other situations like when I was in college the first time and I told you everything that happened with Broc, Bellinger, and Maya Rivera. You know, these two people took it upon themselves in various different ways to spread rumors about me, try to defame me, and a lot of the other events that ended up transpiring, I truly believe a lot of it really comes back to the two of them. If I didn't know any better, I would say, you know, a lot of the things that are happening now are also a result of their actions. Even though I have had nothing to do with these two people for the past few years since I left that other hospital and whatnot. But, you know, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about difficult people. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about very ignorant people. You know, there are some people that, even if you have nothing to do with them, or whatever the case may be, they cannot respect healthy boundaries. You know, when these people are trying to figure out what your social media accounts are, and then they're going and running to whoever they want to go to try to interfere in your personal life, you know, this is becoming a very serious problem. And if, once again, people need proof of that, you can just look at my situation. You know, for 3 years, I have just worked my ass off towards a college degree that I am not going to get now. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to a lot of petty biases from a lot of people who, honestly, if they didn't like me or didn't agree with me or didn't like my personal life, all they had to do was just stay off my social media. I'm not forcing anyone to log on to these platforms. I'm not uh, handing out my channel information in my personal life. So, as to how these people are finding the channel here, I don't know. You know, I'm sure at this point it's probably by word of mouth from a lot of other people from over the years that, had old links to the channel, and, at that point, okay. But what I would really just have you guys understand is that when we're talking about identity and free speech rights in America, you know, this is how restrictive things are becoming now. I'm literally in a situation now where there's a lot of different topics, there's a lot of different things that I would like to discuss with a lot of you on here in the future, but now I'm in a situation where my hands are tied, and I can't do that because I know that if I get new social media accounts, if I keep doing what I'm doing now, there are always going to be all of these random people who will never identify themselves because they're cowards, who will be trying to monitor what I'm doing. They're going to try to figure out where I'm working. If I re-enroll in another college somewhere, they will be trying to figure out where I am going there and all this other stuff. So this is why ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm really just done with social media in general. You know, I know there's a lot of people that their only use for social media is the clout chasing and taking mirror selfies or whatever the case may be. But I don't want to use my social media platforms for that. So there's no point for me to really have social media. The whole point of what I was trying to do with my social media accounts was to be doing something that no one else was doing. I was trying to do something that no one else had the courage to do, and a lot of that came down to, once again, talking about a lot of these topics that are going on today that, you know, a lot of people know that there are a lot of problems going on, but they don't have the courage to speak about it. And unfortunately, because a lot of people honestly are cowards and they don't have the courage to publicly support me or speak out themselves about a lot of the things that I talk about and rally behind me, it ends up becoming a situation where I am the only one being exposed. I am the only one basically on the front lines of all this, taking risks that no one else can be seen taking. And this is why, in many cases, I am the only one that gets sabotaged. I may be having to end my time in this college program now, but there are plenty of other people who are of like mind, like me. They may not have to sacrifice certain job opportunities now as a result of that, but that doesn't change the fact that they still agree with me. And there are many things that, I have had conversations with them about, and they see eye to eye with me on a lot of these topics. It's just the fact that they're scared, and for some reasons, I understand this, they're scared because they know the kind of world we live in right now. And this really has become a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you look at a situation like me and what I've literally just put up with for the past 3 years with all of these social media stalkers, especially in healthcare and in these hospitals, and everything that's transpired after that, they have every reason to be timid. You know, So I understand on some level why they wouldn't want to speak out about certain issues, but like I said before, this is really getting to the point where if people can't simply just engage in their First Amendment rights anymore without all of these fake people all around us trying to sabotage us for that, honestly, I don't really know what we're doing. I really don't know anymore, you know, what the end goal is for all of this stuff. I don't know why a lot of us are spending our time and energy dedicating ourselves to these employers, dedicating ourselves to these college classmates, these random indifferent people that clearly don't care about us in most cases. They don't care if you have to get a new job somewhere, or your personal finances may be up in the air for a little bit because they go and run their mouth and want to try to cause problems over your social media and you having an opinion. If this is how all of these work environments are going to operate now, and how all of these employers are going to be dictating to people how to live, at the end of the day, I really don't know what we're doing anymore. And this is why, and I'm not the only one, but, this is why a lot of people, we're not only just burnt out, we're just done. You know what I mean? Like, we're just done pretending with a lot of people. We're done apologizing for who we are. We're just really just done with the charade of the public theater of all of these people trying to pretend that they advocate for free speech rights in this country. If people don't agree with certain activism groups, that's their prerogative. If they believe in more than two genders, that's their prerogative. If they believe, despite all of the evidence in front of them, that feminism is an ideology that is only about female empowerment, and that it really, in reality, hasn't led to millions of single mothers and broken fatherless homes and a lot of the other crime and poverty that we're seeing all around us in this country, that's their prerogative. But what all these people fail to understand is that their choice to deny reality does not change reality. The various steps that they want to take to try to silence any counterculture narrative that they don't agree with, they are not changing reality. They might succeed short term in getting rid of people like me. And at the end of the day, if that's all they really have left to do with their lives, like if that's the only thing that they can ever feel proud of, that, they kind of like tally up a list of all the people they've gotten fired from these jobs over the years, congratulations to them, I guess. But that's just a short-term solution to an ongoing problem that is never going to change until a lot of people really just wake up to reality and really start having the courage to speak the truth regardless of the consequences. And I've been saying this for a long time now, and I know a lot of you know what you need to do by this point. It's just a matter of if you're ever going to have the courage to do it. And I understand for a lot of you, you never will. For your own reasons, you want to play it safe. You want to keep your head down. And on some level, I understand that. But I would also just have you understand that a lot of you are going to end up giving a lot of your individuality, a lot of your rights to express yourself, you're going to be giving that power over to the kind of people who do not value you as a human being, and they only value your conformity, your fear, and your silence. And at the end of the day, if the benefit to that is having a bigger paycheck, on some level, okay, I get it. But we're really starting to get to a point in society where, I feel like money and materialism and all of this meaningless clout chasing that we see on social media with the endless selfies and all this other garbage, I feel like that's really starting to become more valuable than a lot of other things, and that's another part of the whole problem here. People are sacrificing a lot of things like truth, like family, like friendships, like courage, like honor, like basic morality. People are sacrificing a lot of these things in favor of a lot of other superficial, fleeting pleasures that, hey, if that's how they want to live, that's their choice. But I truly believe this is why we're seeing a lot of people later in life that end up, you know, really hollow, really broken, really alone. And even with all of the money in the world, you see what ends up happening to these people, and you can look at them and just tell that they're not happy. You can tell that they have no love in their life. You see the things they do to people, and you can tell that they've really been reduced to some of the lowest human beings in this world. So, at the end of the day, I suppose if selling your soul in this way is really worth it, then hey, go for it. Um, After a lot of the people I've seen, especially just since going back to college and seeing this newer, younger generation, all of the stuff that they're doing, and even just a lot of other adults, and a lot of the situations that I dealt with them, in and out of these colleges and whatnot. Like honestly, for me, it's not worth it. Like for me, it's not worth living that way. So this is just why I'm doing what I'm doing now. What I opened this with was talking more about spiritual evil and the chaotic evil of that, the evil that happens in the spiritual realms, the evil that, you know, whether it's these serial killers, these satanic cults, whatever the case may be, some truly malevolent forces in the world that influence the course of human events, that influence a lot of very sadistic human behavior, and a lot of times it's, human behavior that even a lot of these psychiatrists and whatnot, even they can't define it. There's a lot of, serial killers in the past who have been interviewed by psychiatrists, and even the doctors themselves, a lot of times they have really not been able to pinpoint exactly what went wrong with these people. And this is why there, are a lot of groups like, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the demonologists, Sergeant Ralph Sarchie, the author of Deliver Us from Evil, and the movie was also based on his life stories. I truly believe that there are demonic forces in this world that are, they're just here in this world. Some people are more susceptible to them than others. There are a lot of people who have, in many cases, generational curses that are on them and their families, curses that they might not even be aware of a lot of times if they have certain family members that were involved in the occult, hundreds of years ago or whatever the case may be, or they had, ties to dark magic. There's a lot of books that really dive into these issues, and that's something that you can look into if that's something, you're interested in learning about. But, on a side note, if we're not going to talk about that form of evil, even if you're a person who's not religious, if we want to look at evil in some very simple terms that I think a lot of people can agree on, is, we can talk about what's happening today with cancel culture. For those that aren't aware, cancel culture is essentially the worldview that is perpetuated by mainstream culture today. It's also perpetuated by a lot of, for the most part, most employers, most colleges, even now, a lot of big globalist institutions. It's this idea that there is one narrative, essentially, that has been approved by a lot of these institutions regarding people, their beliefs, what they are or are not allowed to say, think, do, whether this would be in their personal life or on social media, you know, and it's essentially the idea that anybody who doesn't conform to that narrative, whether it's about, you could look at it like the women's rights topics, there are certain aspects of feminism that a lot of people, men and women both, I might add, don't agree with. But in today's mainstream culture, if you are a person who, publicly states that you do not support various aspects of feminism, you may potentially get cancel cultured for those beliefs. This could take the form of if you say you don't support abortion, for instance, or whatever the case may be. The list goes on and on. Another example is if you say for your own personal reasons that you don't support Black Lives Matter. The general assumption with a lot of people is that on the surface level, Black Lives Matter is only about race. I have made many videos in the past that have once again explained these ideas to try to explain to you guys the history of Black Lives Matter. In reality, Black Lives Matter is a cultural Marxist movement that has used violence in the past and domestic terrorism to try to achieve a political goal. So, that has been my rationalization in the past, and there are many other people who also agree with me, whether they publicly admit it or not, that they do not support Black Lives Matter. This has caused, I would imagine, some controversy in the past with a lot of people. They have tried calling me a racist, which is ironic because whether they realize it or not, as I've said numerous times before, I am actually an African American. So I am not racist against black people. But we do live in a very ignorant culture. So more often than not, it's getting to the point, it is very difficult to explain a lot of these ideas to people. And so these are different aspects of cancel culture, so I'm just trying to lay it out. So if you're not familiar with the term after all this time and you don't understand what's going on when you're seeing people get, what they call canceled from mainstream culture or from society or outcast from society, you can understand what that means, because a lot of people have told me in the past, oh, I still don't know what that term means after all this time. Okay, so now's the time for you to learn what that term means. So, moving forward, my basic statement that I have been trying to say this whole time is that if we want to look at evil in the simplest terms, it is this culture that is moving towards a very ignorant state where not only are thoughts and people being policed and dictated to, but essentially their identity is being erased. You know, we are dealing with employers and colleges and a lot of other people all around us that as soon as we say one word, as soon as they see something on social media they don't like or they don't agree with, whatever the case may be, we are getting to the point where it is now just socially acceptable for those people to deny your existence. You know, I believe this is why a lot of people ghost your text. You know, people tell me all the time about how they get ghosted. A lot of people in the past have also done this to me. They just fall off of the face of the earth and I never hear from them again. In most cases, it's because they have seen something on social media, I'm sure, that offended them. So they have the convenience of just denying my existence or other people's. Once again, that is their prerogative, but what I have been trying to propose to a lot of you guys this whole time is that this is why a lot of the ignorance is happening in this country and in the West at large right now, and this is why a lot of problems are never going to be solved. You know, this country was founded on the principles of different people from different walks of life and different belief systems being able to safely and, you know, openly share ideas with each other, whether that would have been in a public forum, you know, public speaking events, whatever the case may be. And the fact that that form of communication is effectively non-existent today, it is effectively being erased, and all these other things are happening all around us. This is why I truly believe, you know, we are really starting to move toward a thought crime police state, if you want to look at it that way. All of the, you know, big government, uh, you know, regimes that a lot of sci-fi writers wrote about in their days, whether it was George Orwell in the book 1984 or a lot of what Aldous Huxley talked about in Brave New World, you know, a lot of these things are coming to pass in our time period, and honestly, it's really terrifying. And the fact, probably the scariest thing about it, is that even with people like me trying to explain this to you guys, a lot of you still don't get it, and you're still never going to see reality for what it is. I would say that is probably the most terrifying thing about it. And then you also throw into the mix the fact that there are people on the sidelines in a lot of situations, whether they're these social media stalkers or whoever they are out there, who they know what they're doing and they know what's going on, and yet they are trying to subvert the narrative. They are trying to subvert the truth. They are trying to turn all of you against each other or against people like me under the guise of public safety, under the guise of trying to demonize people to hide the truth from them. So when we look at it, you know, there are a lot of different, very serious problems that are happening throughout every infrastructure of our daily lives right now. And, you know, I really don't know what the outcome is going to be to it over time. If we look at patterns of behavior to try to predict future outcomes, the way that it's looking now, it doesn't look like it's going to be very good in the future, at least if some serious changes don't occur. If people keep engaging in this behavior, where whoever they don't agree with, they treat them in a certain way. They want to get them outcasted from society. They feel threatened by certain political ideas or certain religious beliefs that they don't understand. So they want to take steps to try to defame those people or get them removed, for instance, from work environments or whatever the case may be. If these actions of a lot of these people are going to continue to go unchecked and unchallenged, this is just the way that it's going to go in the future. And honestly, that's really not a future that I want to live in. I've been trying to do my best this whole time to speak to different people that, even if I don't agree with them, even if I don't agree with their lifestyle, to just try to find common ground with them. Like I've said before, I've had friends from all different walks of life, and for the most part, we've been able to just have mutual friendships. I don't shove my beliefs down their throat, they don't shove their beliefs down mine. But sadly, there are a lot of other people out there today who are not capable of nuanced thought in this way. They have bought into a lot of propaganda that has taught them that if someone has a certain political belief or a certain religious identity, then they are to be treated in a certain way. And whether they realize that they're doing this or not, like, I truly believe that that is why they are behaving the way that they are. You know, Hearing a lot of the younger generation talk now with the buzz phrases that they do, and a lot of the other, I don't presume to understand a lot of it because I am a millennial. I grew up in the 90s, so there are certain things that I don't understand that the Zoomer generation will, be more well versed on as far as their lexicon and the words and buzz phrases they use. But one of the things that I've noticed, at least with their generation, first of all, they were the first generation in American history to be exclusively raised on social media. You know, those of us that grew up in the 90s, for instance, we had a good 16 years before we even had social media. So our brains had the ability to develop in a lot of different ways that, the Zoomer generation were deprived of that. That doesn't mean that Zoomers aren't capable of being intelligent. There are many intelligent Zoomers. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that when you're looking at the younger generation today and you're wondering why it's so hard for them to read now, why it's so hard for them to comprehend a lot of complex ideas, especially when it comes to world history and philosophy, when you wonder why a lot of them have a lot of learning disorders and a lot of really serious problems with just connecting with other human beings and communicating with different human beings, my thoughts on this is that a lot of it comes from them being raised exclusively on social media growing up. Now, this might not be a problem for some of them, but for a lot of them, I truly think that this is why they have a lot of the issues that they do. And in their demographic and even the children that are younger than them now, Gen Alpha growing up, we are seeing a lot of serious mental health issues in those demographics. And people can call it whatever they want, but this obsession with social media over time, I really don't think it's going to be as beneficial as people think it is, especially not if this pattern of propaganda continues to brainwash a lot of people. You know, these algorithms, the way they work, the information that is being given to a lot of people to show them certain narratives, to condition them, excuse me, to condition them to emotionally react in certain ways to certain people, belief systems, etc., symbols, whatever you want to call it. This is extremely dangerous, and the fact that it's very hard to combat because a lot of people do not know how it works, and so it's very difficult to explain these ideas a lot of times. I feel like this is why it's so effective. I have tried my best to explain these ideas the best that I can. For a lot of you, you won't really understand that, like I said, until you go through certain experiences. You might have some occurrences in your daily life where you say a certain word, or you want to speak about a certain topic and someone's going to bring up the term microaggression or triggered. Oh, I feel triggered by that. And you might not know what those words mean, and if you start asking people honest questions, you're going to start to learn that there is an entire lexicon of, in my view and my understanding of all this, that there are a lot of propagandized words that are being used today, and they're effectively being weaponized to condition a lot of people to think a certain way, and they are giving them the justification to effectively play the victim in society, which I had also told you guys before, and why that is really going to be extremely dangerous in the future. Just because you don't agree with people doesn't give you the right to deny their humanity. You might think that you're solving a problem by ghosting people or cancel culturing them, but you're not doing yourself any favors. You're certainly not helping the person who you're doing this to, but you're also not helping yourself as a human being. I don't see how any individual, at least an individual who claims that they want to try to learn more about the world, and they would potentially say that they don't want to be ignorant because they value knowledge, for instance. I don't see how any individual can make that claim and then think that they're ever going to learn anything more about the world by subverting another narrative that they don't agree with. I don't see how that logically tracks and follows. There are plenty of ideas myself that I don't agree with, whether that's on social media or different books, for instance, or different authors that I might not necessarily agree with, but in many cases, I still watch their content and I still pick up their books from time to time because I at least want to understand their perspective. I can't learn more about people I don't understand if I don't take the initiative to try to understand where they're coming from. So, a lot of the practices that I have been doing and been trying to do the past couple years, especially, is to identify the ideas that I might not agree with and to try to investigate them more and do my own research and then further come to my own conclusions and also try to find common ground with other people. This is just an exercise that I do in my daily life, and part of the motivation for that is because I'm really starting to see how ignorant a lot of people are, and honestly, it scares the hell out of me. You know, with the way that I've seen a lot of these other people treat others, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person who other people know they can't speak to me about something because I'm going to flip out emotionally on them because I don't agree with them. I don't want to be viewed as the kind of person who says that they're a free thinker or believes in libertarian ideals, and yet I'm going to socially outcast people who don't agree with me or hold secret grudges against them because they don't believe the same that I do. Personally, I don't want to be viewed that way, and I don't want to live that way, so this is why I do a lot of what I do. So you know, there's a lot of things that have led us to this state right now. I could talk about it forever, but I feel like I've hit a lot of the key talking points as best I can. Where we go from here is really on a lot of you. Like I said before, this message is probably going to get lost in the ether. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that they have no idea what I'm talking about, and they're never going to because they don't care. And, at this point, it's whatever. There's some of you that have followed me for years, so you can keep up with what I'm doing, and there's a lot of other people that they'll randomly find the channel, or they don't even have any interest in anything I do to begin with. So like all of this is meaningless to them, and I understand that. So fine, like at this point, that's whatever. But for a lot of you who, you know, have been, tracking this up until this point, just what I would tell you is that, a lot of us have a lot of really serious choices to make. And, like a lot of other generations, the future of the world is really going to be in our hands. Um, I'm hopeful that some meaningful changes will be affected over time, but I also don't want to understate how difficult that's going to be. And I want a lot of you to understand that, we are going to be dealing with a lot of difficult people with a lot of years of unresolved baggage for whatever reason, however that would manifest. And we are also going to be dealing with a lot of ignorant people. That's just the reality of the world. That's the way that it's always been. It's a lot more compounded these days because despite all of its benefits, one of the biggest setbacks of modern communications technology is that it has effectively made a lot of people a lot more ignorant, and that's just the reality. And in a lot of cases, I can tell you firsthand from my own experiences and from plenty of the other experiences of a lot of the people I know, that a lot of what we are going to be up against and a lot of what we are going to be dealing with is literally the consequences of, at this point, it really comes down to decades, literal decades of indoctrination, which has been achieved via various methods. A lot of it comes from effective marketing. A lot of it comes from the entertainment industry. It comes from the public educational system. It comes from TikTok. It comes from Hollywood. It comes from a lot of different sources that when people are only getting their information from those sources and they are no longer reading books, they are no longer thinking for themselves, they are going down certain narratives which preach to them various life philosophies, whether that would be the positive vibes only philosophy, which is essentially a form of cognitive dissonance. It teaches people that anyone they don't agree with, they should just ignore them so that they can be happy. And it's basically a form of also confirmation bias, which that is another psychological topic that has plenty of research into it. You guys can look that up. But the positive vibes only ethos is very popular today, especially in America. I believe that also leads to a lot of ghosting because as soon as you tell somebody something they don't want to hear, no matter what your intentions may be or no matter how polite you may be when you communicate these things to them, they want to label you as toxic for doing so. They want to label you as a narcissist for doing so. As I said, there is an entire lexicon of ideas that have been promoted by these ideologies for decades now that is really starting to affect the way people think, the way that they treat other people, and the way they live their lives. I understand a lot of them don't understand that, which is part of the whole point of a lot of what I do and a lot of what a lot of these other public speakers I have referenced to you guys do, because part of the whole goal with what we're trying to achieve is to help a lot of you unplug. You know, when we say unplug, what we're talking about is rejecting all of these lies of societal conditioning that have effectively been puppeting a lot of people this whole time to, once again, live their lives a certain way. As I stated before, there is a lot of cognitive dissonance and denial surrounding these topics because of the fact that the way the ideologies work, you know, the people promoting all of these different things today, they are really brilliant marketers. And the proof of that is that a lot of the buzz phrases you hear people saying, for instance, like strong independent woman, boss queen, whatever the case may be, these are buzz phrases that the feminist movement has sold to modern women today. These people are such effective marketers that they have conditioned people to say these buzz phrases, which over time convinces them that the words that they're saying are good ideas or are beneficial for them in many ways. And the very tricky thing with all of this is trying to separate, once again, truth from reality. On the surface level, a woman saying strong independent woman may have some benefits in regards to a female's autonomy and her ability to make her own choices and function in society with other men and in workplaces and whatever the case may be. On the surface level, these may be beneficial to females. The counter side of this is that there are also cons to these buzz phrases. You could also look at it in terms of, you know, if a strong independent woman ends up alone later in life or ends up divorced as a consequence of this lifestyle, which was sold to her once again by TikTok or Hollywood or the music industry or the public educational system, you know, obviously there are certain life paths that would be detrimental to her if she only lives her life by these buzz phrases or by these feminist ideologies. So that is just an example of how these buzz phrases operate. And the evidence of what is going on with them is the fact that so many people are saying these words today, and on the surface level, they just think and believe that they must be good. You know, they just must be morally right, you know. Just in closing, in one of the videos that I was watching for this diversity, equity, inclusion class, you know, they assigned us to watch a TED Talk. The talk was about diversity in workplaces. And just from listening to the public speaker talk, I could really see threads of how a lot of the propaganda that I have been referencing to you guys in this video, how it is already manifest in this culture. When she was on that stage, she was saying a lot of buzz phrases about patriarchy or about, you know, female oppression. And the ways that she was using those words, not only was she saying them with the confidence that everyone in the audience would know some kind of negative implication of the words, which I thought was really bizarre because she was saying these statements as if everybody in the audience would automatically agree with the statements. One of the phrases that she used was, uh, just to loosely quote her, she was saying, oh, well, clearly dress codes and work environments today are the product of patriarchal sexist values, which she ended up relating to the 1800s. She made that statement as if it were not only reality, but as if anybody who challenged it or disagreed with it was just accepted that they would automatically be viewed as an intolerant person for not agreeing with that statement. And furthermore, no one in the audience protested. They basically were just nodding their heads as if what she said was just acceptable. If we are to dissect this statement, think about what she said. So, first of all, she referenced patriarchy. And in at least popular culture, and this applies to colleges, academia, Hollywood, the entertainment industry, all these other facets of society that I've been speaking about, this obsession with patriarchy at this point, it has literally become this idea, this widespread notion that patriarchy is innately evil. There are entire college lectures surrounding this topic. There are countless other echo chambers I'm sure you guys could find on YouTube and other sources that are essentially at this point, they're leftist, liberal echo chambers that operate under this ideology. And what that is that their basic claim is that patriarchy is the idea that men are innately evil, and especially these days, white men are innately evil, but all men in general are innately evil and they are never to be trusted, which once again, this is why the feminists are very fond of getting behind this ideology. It is this modern notion that all of society has been built by evil men who have only ever lived and existed to oppress women and racial demographic groups to obtain power or further their own ends. And as I've said numerous times over the years, while there may be some truth to the male desire over the course of history for conquest, for obtaining women, for obtaining wealth, for obtaining status within power hierarchies, however this would manifest, the basic statement that all men are innately evil, as if that is the only biological role that men have ever served throughout all of human history, is not only a terrible misreading of history, but it is simply not true. And as many other scholars have aptly pointed out, this feminist notion that patriarchy itself, the idea that all of modern civilization is effectively being controlled and run by evil men, or that men are the only demographic in society who have the upper hand, let's say, in society, is also simply factually inadequate. And it is once again a logical fallacy. Statistically speaking, at least in America, the demographic that always does worse in school is men. The people who commit most often are men. People who die in wars are men, compared to women at least. More men die in wars than women. And more victims of violent crime are men. So, this feminist notion that all of society is dominated by a male power hierarchy is clearly not true. Statistically, we see this, but also empirically, all around us in our daily lives. And, once again, if you need proof of this, in many work environments today, you just look at the amount of women compared to the amount of men that are in these fields. And perhaps the most crucial component of all of this, and the most obvious evidence of the fact that this construct of patriarchy, which the feminists and a lot of these other ideologues want to say exists today, the most obvious evidence that it does not is the asymmetrical treatment that we witness in family law with regards to how men are treated by the law in relation to women. And if I didn't know any better, I would just tell you guys, in the future, when you're wondering what happened to me and you're wondering why all this controversy has been continually going on over the simple matter of my social media over the years, I would have you just know this, okay? The way that this country operates right now, a good majority, a vast, overwhelming majority, I should say, of women are currently single mothers. I'm not denying the humanity of those women. I may not agree with their lifestyles, all of the hookup culture garbage that they buy into, all of the boss queen, she don't need no man mantras that they want to live their lives by, like that makes them savage or that makes them a baddie, whatever you want to, however you want to call it. I am not denying their humanity as women, okay? But at the same time, I would also like a lot of you to just remember the fact that I can almost guarantee you that almost every single complaint that has ever likely been brought against me, against my social media, and against my podcasts has originated from the starting point of the fact that these single women, especially the demographic of single mothers, they literally hate my message. And in a lot of situations, it's because their identity as single mothers has become so normalized in American culture now that they literally can't stand the idea of any man or any woman, for that matter, opposing that identity. They cannot stand the idea of people who may just have traditionalist values. This doesn't mean they're Christians necessarily. They could be pagans with traditionalist values, and I know many of them myself. They could be atheists with traditionalist values that just choose to have nuclear family units with marriages between men and women. But from what I have witnessed, especially in these workplaces and especially in the hospitals and healthcare, what I have witnessed is that a good majority of these women, especially if they are single mothers, they are so hostile towards men because of this feminist ideology that has been preached to them now for decades, like I am trying to explain to a lot of you guys. They are so hostile towards men now as a result of that. They are so antagonistic to opposing worldviews, to traditionalists, to anyone for that matter, who dares simply to just not support their lifestyle. they feel so threatened by that that this is why a lot of the other problems get caused. And I'm sure that there are a lot of women who will listen to this message later and they will know damn well what I'm talking about. I'm not going to list any of their names here because that's not my place to do. A lot of them know who they are, and at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. And what I have been trying to explain to them and a lot of other people this whole time is the fact that they are free to live their lives how they want. But if they want to start crossing my personal boundaries and interfering in my personal life to dictate to me what life values I have to foster with regards to marriage or family or raising children, whatever the case may be, this is when we are going to start having very serious problems. So honestly, at the end of the day, I think it's really just for the best that I do not work in healthcare or in hospitals in at least in the near future until some very serious changes happen in this country, because from every work environment I have witnessed, in the majority of the cases, the people who have been stalking my social media have more often than not been single mothers, and for whatever reason they are usually the ones who want to try to interfere in my personal life or bring complaints against me because, as I said before, they are literally obsessed with this feminist ideology that has preached to them that everyone must just accept their lifestyle. Everyone must just worship single mothers as heroes, because that is another one of the very popular propaganda buzz phrases today. Single mothers are heroes, end quote. So the reason that I do not support that buzz phrase is because, in my understanding of things, that is anti-family. When you are promoting buzz phrases like single mothers are heroes, you are not only incentivizing behavior, but you are really starting to teach numerous generations of women that their highest aspirational ideal in life should be to either get married and then get divorced, or to never get married at all, etc., or to just keep having random children with random men for the rest of their lives. And at least according to my own personal values and what I believe in, I am not supporting behavior like that. Now, if they want to live their lives that way, that's fine. Most of the single mothers I know, like I said before, they never even have the courage to speak to me directly about anything that they've ever seen on my social media over the years, assuming they can even comprehend it or keep up with half of what I do, like I mentioned before. But like I said, I have respected their boundaries in the past, and I don't bring these topics up with them, but they are the ones that are going and looking at my social media. So just from that act of them doing that, it proves to me that no matter how much they may disagree with me, no matter how much they hate me, at the end of the day, they know that I am speaking truth and I am talking about a lot of things that no one else really has the courage to speak about. So at the very least, whatever resentment they may have towards me is irrelevant. As I've said before, I didn't force them to choose this lifestyle. I didn't indoctrinate them with feminist ideology for decades in this country. Literally all I have been doing this whole time is providing a countercultural narrative, especially for men, before they make the mistake, which I've seen plenty of men make this mistake, of really getting involved with a lot of these women, because in a lot of situations these relationships, they end very badly. These women do a lot of sketchy things behind the scenes that a lot of you are never going to know about. So a lot of what Red Pill in general talks about, and a lot of the topics of the manosphere, is to help educate men who have been raised in this indoctrinated society to know how to best navigate this culture that we live in right now, which honestly is really dominated not only by a lot of women who have their own intentions and their own motivations, but it is also heavily steeped in this feminist ideology that does not support men, that does not support masculinity, and honestly wants a lot of men to just be reduced to slaves to this feminist establishment and to the kinds of women who do not value them as men at all to begin with. So, this is where a lot of the countercultural narratives come from to begin with, because, especially with relation to family law, there are a lot of men who end up getting financially destroyed later in their lives, whether this would be through divorce court or child custody cases. And probably the sickest thing about all of it is that the reason they get exploited in this way is because the schools and all these other places today, they are not taking the time to educate men in the ways that I and a lot of other people do about the ways that family law and a lot of these other infrastructures operate. So, getting back to the topic of patriarchy, if anyone out there still believes that this patriarchal structure actually exists, I would just like you to tell me how it is that in family law, 86% of men in this country lose child custody cases to women. Because if you can explain to me how this supposedly hyper inclusive society that is all about gender equality and about men and women being treated equally and fairly, especially in the eyes of the law, if you're going to make that statement, then please, explain to me how 86% of men lose child custody proceedings in this country. And that's not even including all of the finances they lose through the divorce cases. So, I'm not going to hold my breath on the answer for that question because I know that none of you will ever be able to answer it, because the simple reality is that family law, at least how it operates today, it highly skews in the favor of women. More often than not, the courts are simply going to reward women on the basis of the fact that they are the mother of these children. The courts do not care about the moral character of the mother. They do not care about her salary, what her job is, even if she has a criminal record in a lot of situations. They are going to pander to the woman. And honestly, if people want to look at that asymmetrical treatment of men versus women in the family courts, if they want to look at that obvious evidence and then sit back and still say to themselves, oh yeah, that's equality, oh yeah, that's equal, then honestly, there's no other polite way to put it. You people are literally fools, okay? So this has been my basic argument from day one, and I know a lot of these things are never going to change, but at the same time, I think it's extremely smug and complacent for a lot of people who know the reality of how a lot of these institutions operate, especially when it comes to family law. It is extremely smug and complacent for these people to sit back and act like, oh, well, this is irrelevant information. I don't think men really need to know this information. So, once again, if they're going to make statements like that proves one of two things to me. One, they're literally so ignorant that they have no idea how family law works, which a lot of people don't. Or two, they know how family law works, which is why they don't want men to know the truth about how family law works. Because if men are uneducated, just like everybody else in this society right now, and a lot of other women and a lot of other people, when people are not educated, they cannot make intelligent decisions as to how best to further their own interests. So I've said all these things for years. I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And hey, at this point, it's whatever. You can believe whatever you want. I don't really care. But I am not going to be guilt tripped by this woke society into supporting people and causes that, honestly, in a lot of situations, these agendas are literally evil, and that's how I define them. And I don't need to justify why I call it evil, because that's just what it is. When people are deliberately being exploited and manipulated for ulterior motives, and in a lot of situations, people's, like, literally their future and their humanity is being reduced in favor of some other person who they have intentions all of their own. To me, that is what true evil actually means. So, obviously, if all of society was really dominated by a male patriarchy that was exclusively catering and pandering to men, then all of the work environments today would only be filled with men. And that is clearly not as what is happening. Many work environments, and this is once again why I believe I always had so many issues in healthcare, was because the majority of these work environments are comprised of women. There may be some men, but unless it's a field like construction, for instance, in most work environments, a lot of, especially a lot of the sectors today that deal in the humanities or in social work or public education, it highly skews toward the female demographic. Females are the ones who are holding these positions in many cases. So I bring all of this up just to say that her basic statement of patriarchy, right when she said patriarchy, the implication of that was evil. Clearly, where she was going to be headed with that statement was going to end in the place that she was trying to bring the argument to, which is to say, like a lot of these ideological statements, that men are innately evil. And of course, the end of the statement was that dress codes are a result of, once again, sexist, patriarchal values. So just in that one sentence, she is conflating men or males with sexism. And this is another area of contention that I understand a lot of women still don't understand after all this time. But part of the confusion that I'm sure they have with me, because they've asked me these questions in the past, which proves to me their confusion, a big point of contention today, at least in the minds of modern females in America, is that does a person who opposes feminism, does that make them a sexist? That is a question I have been asked numerous times. And I have to explain to people, once again, that feminism is an ideology. Feminism is not the same thing as females. And there are also a lot of females who would identify themselves as anti-feminists. It's more of a countercultural narrative today because a good majority of people in America, whether they know why they identify this way or not, they would more likely than not identify themselves as a feminist, because the guiding assumption is that you have to be a feminist to support women. You have to be a feminist to basically be a tolerant person, or whatever the case may be. And like a lot of these other narratives, anyone who doesn't support feminism, that must just make them a sexist, which is ultimately what causes a lot of confusion. This is a matter, at least for me, that could have been clarified a long time ago if a lot of the women that were working in healthcare actually ever had the courage to ask me that question. But they had already bought into a lot of the cultural narratives that had conditioned them ahead of time to believe that feminism is just to be supported. Feminism must just be good. Feminism must just all be about female empowerment. Never mind the fact that there is plenty of evidence that points to the reality that it has become, at least these days, a normalized hate and supremacist movement against men. But no one ever had the courage to ask me that question, so once again, like a lot of the other things I'm talking to you guys about today, this is why a lot of confusion was caused. You know, I'm sure there were people, and there's probably people now that are still confused about this, because even after all these years later, they still have not taken any steps at all to learn about different ideas that they cannot comprehend. So I just use that as an example to just explain that there are already decades of this ideological infection, which is literally what I call it because that's what it is. There are literally decades of this propaganda and these words that have already been at work, whether people realize it or not, and they have already effectively changed the culture to such an astounding degree that a lot of people don't see it, and also they might not know because they haven't really been exposed to any other counter argument or countercultural narrative. They may not know the dangerous implications of just believing what these people are saying. And in a situation like that, you have to remember a lot of people today only think in terms of followers ratios or social status. So the fact that this is a TED talk where this was being said, in a lot of people's minds, I'm sure the guiding assumption was that, oh, well, this person just must be a reliable source. Who would let somebody get on a stage and speak if they, were going to lie to the audience, or if they, why would they let them speak if they were already ideologically infected? Of course, whatever this person says must be accepted as truth. Of course, whatever they get up and say must not be that bad or detrimental to uh, listen to and then live my life by, because here's this person with all of these college degrees or social status or whatever the case may be, and here they are at a TED Talk. So whatever they have to say must be so important and so relevant that it just must be true. So that is something to also keep in your mind when you see a lot of these public speakers. Uh, and you really start to listen to the things they're saying. I would, as just another practice, I would always keep in the back of my mind that you are allowed to evaluate what the person is saying, and you are allowed to disagree with them regardless of their sex, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion. And the reason I'm saying this is because the way that group identity politics works today is that anyone who disagrees with a certain person who is saying whatever they're saying, a lot of times it gets twisted that, well, the reason you're disagreeing with them is because of your own personal biases. The reason you're disagreeing with them is because they don't live their life the way you want them to. So innately, you must hate that person. You must have, your own biases that you need to re-educate yourself about, and you need to reevaluate everything that you've ever been taught. They really are brilliant marketers when it comes to reverting a lot of these social and political issues back to the original starting point of you are not allowed to disagree with anyone simply on the basis of their group identity. And this is not only a logical fallacy, but it is also extremely dangerous, because if an entire society is going to be run on the idea that a person's orientation or their identity in any way as a human being is never to be challenged because their identity supersedes truth, supersedes any form of morality, this is a very slippery slope. Historically speaking, honestly, this is how a lot of sociopaths and megalomaniacs have ended up coming to power, because those people reach a point where they can no longer be challenged or held accountable for their actions, And the reason for that is because they use this shield, almost, is kind of how I look at it. They use this shield, in this case, of their identity to protect them from criticism, to protect them from having to explain themselves in detail or justify their actions. No matter who any person is, this is extremely dangerous. And over time, once again, I do not see this really going that well for any country or any employer or any group of people. So, my word of encouragement to you guys would be to be very patient with a lot of people. Like I said, there are a lot of people that they may not know why they speak or think or believe in the ways that they do. If they show a willingness to learn, then those are the people that you can potentially have some kind of respectful conversation with. There are going to be a lot of other people who that is never going to be possible, so that just is what it is. Personally, I wouldn't even waste my time on those people at this point, but you can do whatever you want to do. There are going to be a lot of societal pressures for a lot of you to go down a certain life path or go down a certain narrative. The more you look into these things, the more that you will realize how propagandized this country is right now. How long it takes a lot of you to figure that out, I don't know, but I wish you the best of luck. When you finally realize that, choices ahead of you, to decide how you want to proceed.